Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would talk about this little video. And this video is going to entail, all in all, at least a conversation about that of the 135-pound division overall. And of course, for those of you that don't know anything about the 135-pound division, or all in all may not know a lot of the fighters there is a great amount of talent there. Of course, you have, Gervonta Tank Davis there and Ryan Garcia there. You have Vasyl Lomachenko, the WBC champion Devin Haney. And of course, you have the person with the rest of the belts there, the new Australian fighter overall that has sort of came on the map because, of course, he ended up upsetting Teofimo Lopez overall, or at least upsetting the odds in that last fight against Teofimo Lopez. I thought that George Kambosos put on at least a very decent performance. It was a decently competitive fight. I did personally favor Teofimo Lopez to win because I thought that he personally would be a little bit too skilled and athletically gifted. But at the end of the day, Teofimo Lopez, I don't think that he put his best foot forward, and I don't think all in all that he fought the best fight possible. And on top of that, it was a possible upset in the making because, as I said in my prediction video, even though I predicted Teofimo Lopez to win that fight, George Kambosos is a person that had a very, very similar style to Teofimo Lopez. And sometimes when people have very similar styles, that is the matchup all in all that they're going to have the most amount of problems with. But anyways, when it comes down to it, the big question is about Mr. George Kambosos Jr. is all in all, who is he potentially going to face next within the 135-pound division? He does have several different options that could appeal to him. Mr. George Kambosos could take the Ryan Garcia route. He could take the Vasyl Lomachenko route. He could take the Devin Haney route. He could take the Gervonta Tank Davis route. I think personally that any one of those fights would be acceptable. To me, a fight is acceptable as long overall as it somewhat makes sense, whether it be monetarily or whether it be overall competition-wise. And I think that any of those fights, to be honest with you, I think that any of those fights, at least for George Kambosos, would be A grade. So I would not necessarily have a problem with any of those fights happening next. But Boxing Ego, he's going to be talking about the video. We're going to tune in here. Should be very interesting. But the big question that I also have about Mr. George Kambosos is not only who he's going to face next, but can he hold on to those titles? Because a certain amount of people, all in all, intuitively, no matter what channel you watch, no matter what agenda that they try to push, it depends overall what fighter they like. If you like Devin Haney or Gervonta Tank Davis, of course you're going to want Devin Haney or Gervonta Tank Davis to face George Kambosos next because that gives them the opportunity to possibly become unified within that division. If you like Vasyl Lomachenko or Ryan Garcia, of course, you're going to want them to face him next because, just to put it simply, George Kambosos, in my opinion, he's a decent fighter. I would put him on the A- level, but he is not an A to A+ fighter. It just is what it is. And I think a certain amount of fans and I think a certain amount of people realize that. I think even Shakur Stevenson, who's at a lower weight class, realizes that. And that's why a certain amount of people would be so interested in seeing a certain amount of their favorite fighters in the ring with him. Because this is a fighter that, in my opinion, he's a good fighter. But when I take a look at George Kambosos, I don't really see anything higher than that of another Andrew Ruiz Jr. What do I mean by that? I think George Kambosos is a very decent fighter. I think that he's very tough. I think that he does have certain skills that are very, very good. But when I take a look at George Kambosos, I think that he's just another fighter that won the titles over a very talented fighter that did not overall really prepare extremely well for the fight and all in all was just the wrong type of style for him. And I think as soon as he, faces a dude that is going to be fully prepared for him and overall has a different type of style and overall has an A-grade skill set, I don't believe that he is going to beat that fighter. I do not believe personally that George Kambosos will beat Devin Haney. I do not personally believe that he'll beat Gervonta Tank Davis. I don't believe that he'll beat Vasyl Lomachenko. He maybe could defeat a Ryan Garcia just because Ryan Garcia is a little bit inexperienced and does have the most amount of holes in his game out of any of those other contenders. But George Kambosos, to me, when I look at him, all I see is another Andrew Ruiz Jr. Someone that, yes, he has a majority of the titles, but he has a majority of the titles, in my opinion, not because he's all around the most talented guy there, but I think overall that he was very fortunate to face a fighter, all in all, that had the perfect style matchup for him. That's my personal opinion, and some people may massively disagree with me. But that is why it is so important to a certain amount of people that certain fighters get this George Kambosos fight because this is really a meal ticket for them. So overall, we'll see who really gets this fight. It should be very interesting. But anyways, let's see what Ego has to say. Let's get into it.
George Kambosos, what will he decide? That is the burning question that fans want to know. What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Listen, I don't know how you found my video, but somehow, some way, you made it. Help others find the content by throwing a like on the video. It does go a long way when you guys do that, so I appreciate you. It encourages more than you think, so shout out to everybody. Now, the $1,000,000 question is, who will George Kambosos fight next? He just beat Teofimo Lopez. He did it handily. 32 minutes ago, as of me recording this video, this is what Kambosos put on his video.
Well, when you say handily, let me say this, because it depends. It depends on the fighter, all in all, that they like. And we all know Ego, that he's a part of the LDBC and new media, so we all know pretty much what that entails. Well, now, don't get me wrong, I do think that he did beat Teofimo Lopez, but it was a very competitive fight. I thought that it was about a 7 rounds to 5 fight in favor of George Kambosos. You could have possibly scored it 8 rounds to 4 as well. But like I said, now this is the big question about George Kambosos. Not only who is he going to face next, but can he potentially beat those guys, those A-grade fighters? I'm talking about the Lomachenkos, the Haneys, the Davises, and maybe even the Ryan Garcias. Can he potentially beat those fighters? I think that George Kambosos is an A- fighter. Excuse me, an A- fighter. But when I take a look at him, I don't see someone that is the creme de la creme. That's my personal opinion. He is a person with some faults, just like Teofimo Lopez. Now, in my opinion, he has better, feet than Teofimo Lopez and a little bit better head movement, but he does keep his hands down a lot, and sometimes volume punching can be a little bit of a problem with him, meaning what? That I don't think that he throws as much sometimes as what he may need to. But we'll see what happens. That's why I'm saying whoever is going to get this fight next, it is going to be a very, very big opportunity for them. And it's also going to be an opportunity for Mr. George Kambosos to prove that he's not another Buster Douglas, or I won't compare him to Buster Douglas, but like I said, that he's not another Andy Ruiz Jr., or Nate Diaz, when Nate Diaz ended up beating Conor McGregor, but then in the rematch, he pretty much got his ass whooped. So like I said, is George Kambosos another Nate Diaz? Is he another Andy Ruiz Jr.? Or is he a legitimate fighter? Is he a person that is going to eventually be on the A to A plus level? Can he beat the Lomachenkos? Can he beat the Haneys? Can he defeat the Davises? We'll see what happens.
Verified Twitter account. So this is breaking. Y'all gotta pay attention. If you like content like this, subscribe. He says Devin Haney, Vasil Lomachenko, Gervonta Tank Davis, Ryan Garcia. Who's next? I want them all. And it has the Australian flag in the venue, so it sounds like he's saying I want them all in Australia. Who do the great fans want to see me defend my crown against in 2022? So you guys have an opportunity to vote. There's, at the point of recording this video, 1,900 people that voted. 6 days left, so I guess vote. I don't know how it's going to be decided in the end. I've already told you my honest opinion. The two names I want to see Kambosos fight, one of these two. Either Devin Haney or Gervonta Davis, right? I see he put Lomachenko and Garcia. It's very easy for me to qualify why I want to see the fights that I want to see.
Well, I think that it's easy to qualify any of those fights. I think that it's easy to qualify a Gervonta Tank Davis and Devin Haney fight. Of course, all those guys you can debate are A-grade fighters. But there's a reason why Ego, of course, is going to push Mr. Gervonta Tank Davis and Devin Haney, just as a Dantes would, just overall as an Aki TV would. Now, what they're going to try to spread you is overall, oh, well, of course, because Devin Haney is a WBC champion and Gervonta Tank Davis, all in all, he's a person that, is the most talented fighter there. Right, but if you're acting all in all like the undisputed championship is all that matters, then you should overall think that, the only fight that makes sense is a Devin Haney. Because if we're just talking about in terms of money, or if we're talking about in terms of notoriety, all those fights overall can possibly make sense. But there's a reason why they don't want Lomachenko or Ryan Garcia overall to possibly get that fight, because they know more than likely that any of those fighters could possibly beat George Kambosos. So it is what it is.
We'll start with Devin Haney. We'll go in alphabetical order. Devin, D comes before G for Gervonta. Devin Haney has a WBC belt. Now, I know the WBC has pretty much denigrated that belt and made it sound like it's worthless. But I don't care what Mauricio Suleiman's saying. He created confusion. He created this separate entity that is the franchise champion.
I would agree. Devin Haney, all in all, is the legitimate WBC champion. There is no doubt about that. And whoever wants to be completely possibly unified in that division, they will have to go through Devin Haney.
And
because you cannot call yourself completely unified without having all the 4 belts.
You know, Devin Haney is a skilled fighter who should be fighting the top class names. His last 2 fights, he fought, people said, oh, you need to do something, impress me. You know, we heard this from Teofimo and Bob Arum and Ryan Garcia, that Devin needs to step up and fight a quality top 10 name. He did that in his last 2.
Well, he fought Jojo Diaz when it came down to, and he fought Jorge Linares, even though Jorge Linares, in my opinion, was a bit washed up, but it is what it is. But at the end of the day, Devin Haney, he is one of the top contenders there. And like I said, if someone is going to be completely unified, then they do have to go through Vasily Lomachenko. Or excuse me, they have to go through Devin Haney, excuse me, no doubt about it. You know.
Fights. This would end all confusion for the greater good of boxing as to who is the undisputed at the lightweight division. This one fight. So I know George Kambosos, he put other people, but that's why I want to see the Devin Haney fight, because boxing is so easy. What the fans want to appease the fans is usually often pretty easy. Boxing is not rocket science.
Well, that's the thing overall about George Kambosos' next fight. You know, if you actually talk about the fans in terms of the majority of fans in boxing, Vasily Lomachenko is probably going to get the most amount of votes. You know, it is going to depend on the different demographics. Of course, depending on the demographic, the Caucasians, of course, they're more than likely going to want Vasily Lomachenko to get that opportunity because they want Vasily Lomachenko to prove once again that he is a legitimate top 10 pound-for-pound fighter. And I think that beating George Kambosos, whoever beats him, it is going to enter them probably into the top 10 pound-for-pound. But if those fighters are going to enter into the top 5 pound-for-pound, they're going to have to face each other. Or they're going to have to face Devin Haney, Vasily Lomachenko, Gervonta Tank Davis, Ryan Garcia, Shakur Stevenson as well, Oscar Valdez. Those are the creme de la creme fighters.
If you make great fights when they matter, meaningful fights, hopefully the guys have been branded, then you typically get great results, a good fight out of it.
I would agree. That's why I don't know why you were so surprised when Gervonta Tank Davis's numbers tanked against Isaac Cruz.
Skill fight out of it.
That's what I say. You know, like Boxing Yo, he made a video about Gervonta Tank Davis's numbers, and I reviewed it. And Boxing Yo was like, "Oh, it's so weird how boxing fans are asking for his pay-per-view numbers." It's not weird because people ask for pay-per-view numbers all the time. Because Gervonta Tank Davis is allegedly a very, very big star, and I do believe that he is a very big star. But if you're alleging certain things like he's the face of boxing, like some of these channels overall do, you know, then they're going to do that, especially certain amount of these Canelo Alvarez fans. They are going to be on your ass. It is what it is, you know, because Canelo has a very, very big and vibrant fan base, you know.
And more fanfare, more press, more people showing up, more people anticipating it. It's that simple. Devin Haney is a skilled operator. His trainer, Mick Bay, fought George Kambosos, so there's kind of an entanglement, you know, so to speak, and a backstory there. And Kambosos is coming off the best win of his career with Teofimo. Devin had previously been calling out Teofimo, and there was all these obstacles from Top Rank and ESPN and Teo's team, particularly as far as what needed to happen. Kambosos, he was the mandatory, he was the man up, he got the opportunity. As you can see from this picture, Devin already has money. That's nothing new to him. He's probably, outside of Gervonta Davis, I would say that Devin Haney is making more money than anybody else not named Gervonta Davis in that weight class.
Well, I think that all the fights for George Kambosos would do decent money. Who do I believe personally that George Kambosos is going to go after next? I believe he is going to go after Vasily Lomachenko. Because Vasily Lomachenko is a person that, he's 33 years old. He's a person that, if you especially want to prove yourself against top tier fighters, that's a great win on your resume. You know, Vasily Lomachenko is, Do I think that George Kambosos looks at Vasily Lomachenko as, the easiest possible opponent? Maybe. But when it comes down to it, I think that George Kambosos, not only does he respect Lomachenko's skill set, but he takes a look at Lomachenko and he says, if I'm able to get a win over this guy, I'm going to be remembered as a decently great fighter. Where Devin Haney, Gervonta Tank Davis, of course, he's worth the risk as well because he's such a big star, and of course he's looked at as an A-grade opponent. But Vasily Lomachenko, out of any of those other fighters, he's the one that has the biggest pound-for-pound claim. Because, of course, Vasily Lomachenko overall, at least, by many of the media and by certain fans, because, of course, Vasily Lomachenko was formerly, at least by many people, the number one pound-for-pound fighter. So, of course, that would be a very decent win as well, and that's why I personally believe that more than likely George Kambosos is going to take that fight next. But we'll see what happens.
Right? Ryan Garcia, not too long ago, I believe last year, was complaining about getting $200,000 from Golden Boy and saying he wasn't getting the paychecks that he wanted. This is Devin Haney. So we know it's not about, for Devin Haney, it's not about the need or necessity for money, because you can see right there, he got a 2 kilo, and bust downs and all this stuff. So it's not about money. Devin already said that he would go to Australia to fight Kambosos for the title, and most importantly, the meaningfulness. You see that WBC belt that he has, and now there will be no confusion. Is Devin Haney the true undisputed, or is it George Kambosos? So for that reason, I really like the fight, because Devin will either be removed of his belt if he loses, or if he wins, he will be the undisputed guy. And this is what we should be trying to usher towards, in my opinion, in the world of boxing. Clarity, divisional clarity, where you know who is who in boxing and the belt actually means something.
Well, I would agree with that when it comes down to it. But like I said, if George Kambosos were to take a Ryan Garcia or Lomachenko fight or a Gervonta Tank Davis fight and not take the undisputed fight, I can't necessarily be mad at any of those fights because I think all those fights are A-grade fights.
Any Kambosos can do that. And that'll, for Devin's sake, that'll put him on 3 consecutive meaningful fights in a row with ranked guys. And this time would be kind of a consolidation of the belt. The second person that I suggest that Kambosos fight, in my opinion, is Tank. This goes without saying. Tank is the most lit dude from 130 to 140. I think he makes the most money. He makes the most sense. So that's always a good business decision. And he can actually fight. LeBron James is showing up to his fight.
Well, all those guys can fight, but maybe the point overall that Eagle is just trying to make is that Gervonta Tank Davis is, not only is he worth a lot of money, but he is a tremendous fighter. And I agree. Gervonta Tank Davis, like I said, he is a little, I don't want to call him little, I guess, but he is a superstar overall at the lighter weight divisions, I guess is a more appropriate way of saying. Gervonta Tank Davis, in my opinion, he is a superstar in the making. But Gervonta Tank Davis, just like Ryan Garcia, for whatever reason, is being matched up extremely carefully.
As I just pulled up this picture, Meek Mill is saying run down. 629 likes. So Tank is so tapped in, it's not even funny. The culture is messing with him, etc. He's a great skilled fighter, and fighting Tank is just big business. I can't say Floyd Mayweather, but he signed to Floyd Mayweather. But just the same way anybody would, of course, want to fight Floyd Mayweather, that's how it's becoming for Tank Davis. He's kind of getting that Mayweather effect, where in his generation, if you fight Tank, you're scoring.
I agree that it somewhat is that Mayweather effect, and basically what that means is that, if you fight that person, you're going to get a decent amount of claim, or there's going to be a certain amount of views. That's basically what that means. You could also call it the Canelo Alvarez treatment, because Canelo, very, very similar. And that's why I say Canelo, when you talk about in terms of number one pound per pound, he is the number one pound per pound fighter. Because there is no other fighter that has the expectations on their shoulders like a Canelo Alvarez does. No one. Not Gervonta Tank Davis, not Terrence Crawford, not Errol Spence, not Tyson Fury, not Alexander Usyk. There is no one in the world that has the expectations on their shoulders like a Canelo Alvarez. Because Canelo could go from 160 all the way up to cruiserweight and and be overall expected to win any of those fights. There is no other fighter within the world that would be favored to win fights within about 4 to 5 different weight classes. Not any other. Not even Gervonta Tank Davis or Terrence Bud Crawford.
The lottery ticket.
Now, of course, some may say, well, Terrence Bud Crawford, he's worked his way through 3 weight divisions. Yes, but Terrence Bud Crawford, I mean, he'd probably be favored to win anything in 154. But when it comes down to it, Terrence Crawford, he would not be 100% out of his element there. When you talk about the 175-pound and 200-pound weight divisions, those are a little bit more out of their elements. So if Terrence Crawford, maybe if you were to win at 160, I would say all in all that's probably a little bit of a different situation.
What that also comes with is fighting and beating a Mayweather, you would be automatically catapulted. Like can you imagine if Robert Guerrero beat Floyd Mayweather? I mean, it would catapult his whole...
No, personally, I cannot, because Robert Guerrero was never that good of a fighter. But it is what it is. Robert Guerrero got the shit kicked out of him over Floyd Mayweather. I remember that fight. Robert Guerrero overall, he was looking like a damn... he overall was looking like a goddamn punching bag in that whole entire fight against Floyd Mayweather Jr. He got his ass completely kicked.
He would be...
I'm not saying that wasn't a decent win at the time, but Robert Guerrero, I remember when he used to be one of the top contenders, but eventually Robert Guerrero, he pretty much overall got exposed as, for what he was, which was a decent fighter, but not an A-grade fighter, not in the least. That's why he lost almost every big fight in his career.
An instant, like, damn near Hall of Famer. That's the Mayweather effect. Tank has like a baby Mayweather effect where if you can beat him, you're immediately going to become a commodity in boxing and a force.
I agree. It's the same thing with Saul Canelo Alvarez, Vasyl Lomachenko when, before the Teofimo Lopez loss, probably Alexander Usyk and Tyson Fury as well. But that's what happens with the highest classes of fighters. But, I would say that Gervonta Tank Davis, he's more on the Canelo Alvarez level. Because Gervonta Tank Davis, he is supremely talented. And on top of that, he has a lot of acclaim.
Just off of that one name, because of the glow he has around him. The reason I know this is, one, I've been in the game for a minute. But guys like Pitbull Cruz, as you see pictured here, he loses, and he should have lost to Tank Davis. Like, there was no robbery like some people were crying and complaining. And in a loss, people respected his performance enough, and they're like, oh, I'll check for his next fight. And that's how I feel. I like...
That's a good point. But a big part of the reason why Isaac Cruz was more popular after that fight is because, of course, it was competitive. It was sort of like Marcos Maidana after the Floyd Mayweather Jr. fights. No one thought that Marcos Maidana was really going to stand a chance against Floyd, but both of those fights actually were decently competitive. Unfortunately for Marcos Maidana, he never fought again after those fights, but, it is what it is.
Pitbull Cruz before the Tank fight, so it's nothing new to me.
But actually a good comparison would kind of be like, if for those of you that watch UFC, there was a Swedish MMA fighter. Now, he still may be fighting a little bit. I don't know, because he's kind of retired on and off. But for those of you overall that know UFC, probably of a fighter named Alexander Gustafsson. Alexander Gustafsson, he was never really a person that, in my opinion, was ever going to win the belt. But he did get close a couple of times. He had a very competitive and good fight with John Jones. And that's where he really got to start him from. Because John Jones, of course, if you give John Jones a tough fight, you're a pretty decent fighter. And he was also able to give Daniel D.C. Cormier a tough fight and many other very good contenders tough fights as well. So that's kind of like overall, that similar type of vibe.
But even in defeat to Tank Davis, which I do think he lost, he became lit and people started following him.
Or, of course, if you want to talk about someone more popular, you could talk about that of a Nate Diaz. Because Nate Diaz, he's always been somewhat popular, but, as soon as Diaz beat Conor McGregor, that really made the Diaz brothers like 20 times more popular.
The man went from 25,000 followers to like wherever he's at. I mean, I can check right now, but whatever Pitbull Cruz is at now, overnight. So now he has 177 off a loss to Tank. So look what it did to his profile. So can you imagine the event of a guy like George Kambosos, who has most of the belts, with the biggest name in those divisions, Tank Davis? It would just bring a lot of spotlight. Now, the reason the other people that Kambosos mentioned was Ryan Garcia. I'm not big on that fight. I don't reward bad behavior. Ryan Garcia has had a lot of mishaps.
Well, we all know why you're not big on the Lomachenko Ryan Garcia fight. Because we all know, overall, which fighters overall you like to try to promote. It is what it is, and I don't necessarily have a huge problem with that. But when it comes down to it, like I said, just me at least trying to be logical and objective here, at least overall trying my best to be, which I think overall I do a pretty decent job of on this channel. I think I could see any of these fights taking place. I could see overall, these fights are decent fights. Now, maybe if you're a fight against, Jorge Linares or Richard Comey next, then I would say, okay, well, maybe that's not really worth the fight, worth pursuing, at least compared to these guys. But all these fights, in my opinion, have some sort of a claim. They all have some sort of monetary value. And if George Kambosos were going to win over any of these guys, he certainly could get top 10 pound for pound claim.
In his recent career, he started off strong by weathering the storm in January of this year. This is the final Monday of 2021. And Ryan Garcia, after beating Luke Campbell, he fought in January, has done nothing except for talk online and speed bag challenges and cobra bag, reflex bag challenges and body shot challenges and pull out of fights and withdraw. Why on earth should he get Ryan Garcia? He didn't fight Devin Haney, and he was the mandatory for him. He left that to Jojo Diaz. He said he was going to fight Javier Fortuna, a boogeyman, which would have been a great fight for him, and he would have got a lot of credit if he could beat him. He left that for Jojo Diaz, who Devin Haney just beat.
I understand your point, Ego, when it comes down to it, and I somewhat agree with you. But for you saying that you don't reward bad behavior, well, you somewhat rewarded with Tank Davis. Like I said, a lot of these channels, they always like to talk shit on Canelo Alvarez or some of these other fighters out here that have a proven, decently good resume. But then when it comes to Gervonta Tank Davis fighting Isaac Cruz, who he's a decent fighter, don't get me wrong, but he's not an A-grade fighter. They basically try to tell you how big this fight is and all sort of bullshit. It's like, come on, man.
So,
because Gervonta Tank Davis, he didn't have to face Isaac Cruz. He could have fought someone a hell of a lot better than Isaac Cruz.
I don't think Ryan deserves a fight. And the thing is, when it comes to Ryan Garcia, I've even seen Kambosos say this. What are we basing his popularity on? He's not the highest paid in the lighter divisions. Again, he was just complaining about his paycheck. They said he had 8.8 million. Now it's down to 8.7. So he lost followers. You know what I mean? He lost followers because before it said 8.8. So that goes to show and prove my point. If his numbers are dropping and he had more
right, but 8.7 million followers for a guy that has never been in a title fight, that means all in all that, he has some high acclaim. Anyone who Ryan Garcia faces next, there's going to be eyes on that fight. Just like Sean O'Malley in the UFC. Sean O'Malley isn't the most popular UFC fighter, but there's a lot of people who know his name. That's what Ryan Garcia is like. So let's not sit here and pretend like that would not be a big fight. It is what it is.
Followers than he currently has, then that shows he's been inactive. Doing these videos, I mean, that's cool, but what does that do? You know what I mean? So I just don't think Ryan Garcia, I think he should work his way back into the mix, and you shouldn't be able to talk your way. And again, people are saying that he's so tapped in.
Well, it is what it is, but there's exceptions for exceptional people. Just like for Conor McGregor in the UFC, many people believe that he should not get title shot after title shot after title shot. And, I would tend to agree with some people, but at the end of the day, that's going to happen until Conor McGregor's value goes way, 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 way down. And at the end of the day, Ryan Garcia, he does have a certain amount of monetary value.
And his profile is huge. Based on what? What venue did he sell out and put in a crazy amount of people never before done? Or what type of viewership numbers is he doing on DAZN? How many people even watched the Luke Campbell fight? I seen gaping holes.
I can assure you there was a bunch of people who watched the Luke Campbell fight. Overall, there was a bunch of people who watched that Luke Campbell fight. I can guarantee you that. Like I said, a lot of people have eyes on Ryan Garcia.
In the audience at the Luke Campbell fight.
Because I remember when I did that fight prediction, when it came down to it. And, you can tell overall, who, depending on who you talk about, gets the most amount of views. Now, I could do a fight prediction all in all about, Devin Haney next, and it's going to get a certain amount of views. But if I did a prediction about Ryan Garcia, it's going to do twice the views. So that tells you that no matter what people are saying, he has big acclaim. Because whether you love him or whether you hate him, people are interested to see his next fight.
So just because you have an Instagram following, I can't say that he's as big of a fight as some would claim. And then finally, Lomachenko. I think Lomachenko's a good fighter. He beat Nakatani and he beat Comey. But based on his last performance, he tried to showboat and thought he was Roy Jones versus Comey, and then he let his guy recover. And then the guy, Richard Comey, after badly being hurt, survives in a lackluster fight. So I really don't.
Well, it wasn't really a lackluster fight. It was, I mean, if you want to say it was a lackluster matchup, but Vasily Lomachenko pretty much lit him up. But once again, we all know why you're okay with Gervonta Tank Davis getting that fight, but you don't want Ryan Garcia or Lomachenko to get that fight. Let's just, it is what it is. Let's be real. It just is what it is. But like I said, just trying to be logical and objective here. Like I said, I would understand people's perspective about, taking a Gervonta Tank Davis versus Devin Haney fight. But these guys are not, these guys like ego and all this other stuff. Let's be real. We all know why they want Gervonta Tank Davis or Shakur Stevenson or these guys all in all to face George Kambosos. It is what it is. But like I said, any one of those fights, in my opinion, very decent fights.
I feel like Lomachenko had his little window, and now I'd rather see the young guys at it. And Lomachenko doesn't even have 20 fights, and he already has 2 losses, right? That he hasn't avenged either one of them. And his name is not like ringing bells, and he's probably 33 years old. So
his name is not ringing bells. You want to talk about celebrities like you talk about LeBron James overall showing up to that of a Gervonta Tank Davis. Every time Vasily Lomachenko fights, Mark Wahlberg overall and multiple other celebrities, of course mainly Caucasian celebrities, because that's who Vasily Lomachenko, of course, is mainly going to appeal to. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, Vasily Lomachenko rings names. So just stop.
I don't really think the Lomachenko and Kambosos fight is that big. I'd rather see...
Really? You don't think the Lomachenko versus Kambosos fight is that big, but you think apparently that Gervonta Tank Davis... Don't get me wrong, I think Gervonta Tank Davis is debatably the most talented guy there. But like I said, the reason why these guys are saying that fight ain't that big, we all know the reason why, because they don't want Lomachenko getting them titles back and him getting acclaim once again.
Kambosos,
and there is no guarantee that Lomachenko would beat George Kambosos. Like I said, he has to prove to me once again that all in all, he is as great overall as a certain amount of people said that he was.
Undefeated, Gervonta undefeated, Devin Haney undefeated, Even Ryan Garcia. I'm not even fronting. Even though I just told you that I don't think Ryan Garcia deserves the fight per se, I still would rather see the fresh blood duke it out as opposed to Lomachenko. Because Lomachenko, like I said, he's good, he's skilled, but his fights and events aren't really earth-shattering. Vito Milnicki did like 3 million views on Christmas and did higher numbers than Lomachenko versus Comey, and he's supposed to be the Matrix, and they said he was so I just don't think overall it's a huge fight like that. And if Kambosos is demanding the fight in Australia, Lomachenko versus Kambosos in Australia, I think is probably the weakest fight in terms of anticipation.
I highly doubt that. I think that the weakest fight in terms of anticipation possibly may even be, well, I don't know if I would say it's the weakest in anticipation. I'm not necessarily sure which one would be the weakest in anticipation, but I do believe that it will be a very, very big fight.
You got to understand, these are also events. It's like sport, but it's also events. You know what I mean? And styles make fight. I think more the magnitude of Gervonta versus Kambosos or Devin Haney if he went to Australia. Now, this is the thing I will say in closing. It sounds like George Kambosos really wants the fight to be in Australia, and he feels he's earned that, and I can't tell him how to feel. However, all the names have pretty much said they would be willing to travel to Australia, except for Gervonta Davis. Now, this is not coming from Tank Davis's team, but based on what I've told you earlier, in feeling Tank is the A-side guy, I don't know that Mayweather Promotions or Tank's team would send him to Australia because it doesn't really make sense. He's bringing.
No, it makes sense if you want them belts. And Gervonta Tank Davis, in my opinion, of course, in terms of star power, of course, all in all, he is the A side over that of George Kambosos. But George at least may have a little bit of a right to ask for a 50-50 split if he wanted to, because he's giving Gervonta Tank Davis the opportunity to face for 3 out of the 4 belts. So if Gervonta Tank Davis really wants them belts, he may overall have to somewhat acquiesce to those demands. It just is what it is.
LeBron James out in LA, why would you send him to Australia just because it's Kambosos? Like, there's a lot. I'll further talk about it, but there's a lot of people that they have these conceptions of these belts. You see all the games, the sanctioning belts, and companies are doing. So it's becoming the point where, like, Jake Paul, he just made his own belt. He doesn't have like a sanctioning body belt, but people were still entertained by the knockout or some of his other events. You see what I'm saying? So we're really getting away from the belts dictating everything. Tank Davis, whether he was fighting for a belt.
And you know what's interesting? You know what Ego said about the Jake Paul fight? He said that Tyron Woodley, all in all, deserves his rematch. Now, why would he say that Tyron Woodley, all in all, deserves a rematch against Jake Paul? Why would he not say that, you know what, Tyron Woodley was a former UFC champion. He clearly lost to Jake Paul. He's already had his shot. Why not give it to someone else? But you notice he don't say that shit about Deontay Wilder or Tyron Woodley. So we all know what that's about.
Or not, he's must-see TV. You see what I'm saying? So I just hope George Kambosos is realistic, because there are some things that he's saying that raise a little bit of an eyebrow. Like, is he feeling himself? Because he's like, oh, I went to New York to fight Teofimo and I did it the hard way, so now everybody gotta come see me. And I just...
Well, that is being realistic. Something being unrealistic would basically asking for those fighters to, or asking Gervonta Tank Davis anyway, say, you know what, I'm taking this, I want a 60-40 cut. Now, that would be something that's unrealistic. But for someone, all in all, that just beat the man in Teofimo Lopez, and all in all, he has the biggest win there currently, when it comes down to it, no, that's not unrealistic to call himself the A side or say, if you want to come fight me, you do it in my hometown because I just went to America and beat the man in his hometown. That's not unrealistic.
Hope that it doesn't create any problems with Devin Haney or whoever, and they can just make a fight that makes sense for everybody, and that's it. Let me know what you guys think. Drop your thoughts in the comment section, and I'm up. The future is now.
But anyways, that's really about it for that video. But I personally believe that any of those fights would make sense, because I think from a monetary perspective, in terms of money, and I think in terms of overall skills and overall, what it could do for his pedigree, I think personally that any of those fights would make sense. So I don't personally have I don't have a problem with any of those fights happening next. I think that any of those fights overall would be very, very decent. I believe that more than likely the Lomachenko fight is going to happen next, but we'll have to see what happens. Anyways, that's really about it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.